On this episode of the Layover Live, Derek Bombeck stops by to talk about sports tourism. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 179 of the Layover Live. I'm Jason Swick, VP of Strategy and Insights here at Simpleview, and welcome to this week's show. Now, we've all been enjoying a little bit of March Madness. Well, depending, I guess, on how your bracket did. I know mine exploded after Arizona lost to Houston last week, but that's for another story. But as we're talking about sports, what better way to wrap up the month of March than to talk about sports tourism? Now, sports tourism is a rapidly expanding segment in the travel and tourism industry. In fact, it generates billions of dollars of economic impact each year for destinations worldwide. In fact, according to Allied Market Research, the market will garner more than $1.8 trillion with a T by 2030. With sports tourism continuously rising in popularity, many destinations are starting to shift their focus on how to draw in the games, tournaments, and most importantly, the visitors to their destination. By marketing to and promoting sporting events, DMOs and CVBs see an increase in interest in their destination from travelers across the country. However, these destinations must first ask themselves some questions. Questions like, do we have the venues to host these sporting events? What networking opportunities can we take advantage of to help draw in some of these big games? And how can we effectively use our marketing efforts to support sports tourism? Now, I wanted a firsthand look at what it means to successfully cultivate sports tourism in a destination. It's a topic I've wanted to showcase for a long time. And so today I am joined by a subject matter expert who is doing just that. Our guest today is Derek Bombeck, who is the Sales Development Manager of Sports Markets at Lincoln Convention and Visitors Bureau. So Derek, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. Now, there's probably some folks on here who don't know who you are, don't know about your background. How about providing a little bit of that?
Yeah, so I've been in Lincoln for a little over 20 years now. Went to school at Nebraska Wesleyan University, got a sports management degree as well as a communication degree. Went and got my master's at the University of Nebraska Lincoln. And then right from there, right out of college, I started working as the director of events for the Nebraska Athletic Department. Did that for about 10 years. We hosted everything from all home Nebraska athletic events to, at the time, Big 12 championships. And then we transferred into the Big 10 championships and then any NCAA regional and national championships. So it was a great experience right then and there. And then for the past 8.5 years, I've been with the Lincoln CVB, recruiting sports to Lincoln.
Yeah, and it sounds like you guys are really busy, which we're going to find out about as we start to get into this and dig into this a little bit more. So let me talk about, my first question to you. So tell me a little bit about what makes, Lincoln a desirable place for sporting events. That's part of a first part of that question. And then maybe what types of events are you guys trying to attract to the destination?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess first and foremost, when it just comes to being a sports destination city, is we have a very wide range of sports facilities. Like I attested to, having facilities from the Nebraska Athletic Department that we do have access to on occasion, coupled with the new $179 million Pinnacle Bank Arena that was just built in downtown Lincoln. With those kinds of facilities, we're able to host those national and international competitions. And we've been very fortunate to get a few, which I'll name in a bit. But then also we've been very fortunate with youth sports, new complexes like Speedway Sports Complex and the Kinetic Sports Complex. Those are massive indoor facilities that can host basketball, volleyball. So we are huge into the youth sports trend, but we also want to get what we can on that national and international level. So for some of the events that we've attracted most recently, we've had a great relationship around since 2016 with USA Volleyball. And since then, we've hosted 3 international competitions for them. We hosted the 2016 Olympic Volleyball Trials. And then on the international scene, USA Volleyball is able to host the Volleyball Nations League. And for women's volleyball and men's volleyball, they get to host one competition in the United States each year, one for men, one for women. And for the first 2 years of that competition, they chose Lincoln for their women's venue. So great rapport with them. And then, like I just also mentioned, USA Wrestling's been very good to us. We've hosted 5 world qualifying competitions for them over the last 6 years. And then we are always a mainstay for USA Roller Sports National Championships. We've hosted them a number of times over the past few decades.
Yeah, sounds like super, super busy on the sports tourism front. I know as we were talking a little bit before the show, you were sharing that like up to 70% of hotel rooms that are booked in Lincoln are related to the sports market. So I'd love to hear more about that. And then also, how maybe how COVID-19 or how the pandemic maybe had an effect on some of these numbers, right? So maybe you could share that, Derek.
Yeah, so like I said, we've been very fortunate in Lincoln, Nebraska. The amount of hotel rooms bid out and booked through our market is through sports, which a lot of destinations can't say that. A lot of that is accredited to the relationships that we've built locally. A lot of times when I recruit and bring events into town, I'm not going to be the one that is managing their day-to-day operations.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to have great local partners. So we definitely do that. And one of those things that our partners do, whether it's through baseball, softball, basketball, they reach out to us as well. So there might be events that I don't know that are up for bid or that I just maybe haven't looked at, where they obviously have been around the organization a lot, and they just want our assistance in bidding on them, and then utilizing our services that we offer to help run them once they get here. So again, just those initial local relationships have definitely helped build Lincoln as a sports destination. But then you obviously brought up the pandemic, the word we don't speak of here in this industry anymore. But yeah, no, obviously it had a tremendous impact on everybody, worldwide. The hospitality and tourism industry was pretty much came to a halt. But the one thing I talk about a lot when I guest lecture, or just when I speak to different organizations, is sports market is virtually recession proof. And now we found out that it's virtually pandemic proof. And what I mean by that is, if there weren't governmental restrictions put on things, we know that, select clubs and select parents will drive as far as they need to drive and spend as much as they need to spend in order to have their children participate. So that's why we've seen the sports market bounce back much more quickly than other markets that we work with. And that's why, it's been thriving in Lincoln and around the country.
Yeah, I like that you shared that pandemic proof. Like, I like that because it really was. I mean, if we were really looking for those things to do during the pandemic, especially very much early on, knowing that I also have family that participates in a lot of club soccer and things of that nature. Boy, sports tourism seemed to be really taking off and thriving during that time. And then the fact that this is a big niche for you guys, I think is something that you guys were able to take advantage of and start to build and nurture those relationships, and maybe even get some events that maybe you wouldn't have gotten otherwise because of what was happening, right? But I want to kind of get into now a little bit of the digital marketing side, which is really what we're all about on this podcast, talking about digital marketing. So maybe, how are you using digital marketing and technology then to reach your audience? Maybe talk a little bit about a campaign or maybe some of the channels that you guys are using to kind of speak to this audience and get them to come to Lincoln.
Yeah, absolutely. Our communications and marketing team have used a lot of the social media platforms, obviously like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, just to reach a lot of our markets. We used a lot of products associated with SimpleView, such as Acton, as our email marketing platform. And we also found out that one of our best avenues to promote our organization has been through Facebook. This is where we've seen the most engagement, especially when it came to recent campaigns. We just talked about the pandemic, and one of the campaigns that we ran during COVID was the Get a Room campaign. And that was a play on Get a Room U2 from back in the day. We just wanted to make sure we let everybody know, whether it was within the city, within the state or within the region, that they could come to Lincoln and our hotels were safe to stay at. So we definitely used a lot of those social media platforms to get the message out, to let everybody know that we were doing everything we could to make people's travel and stay as safe as possible. Facebook's also where we've seen the most success when promoting events that have ticket sales tied to them. So a lot of those events that I mentioned earlier with USA Volleyball, USA Wrestling, and then a lot with our state high school championships. We've utilized boosted Facebook posts to reach families to get interest in the sports market and sell tickets that way.
Yeah, it's a good point. Social makes a lot of sense in that case, right? Because it's a great way to connect. It's a great way to find that audience around specific interests and things of that nature. That makes a lot of sense to me on that side of the house. I love this Get a Room campaign. I think it's a clever idea and a way to really reach that intended audience. And then you also talked about utilizing marketing automation and act on to nurture the audience. So once I know who they are, how can I nurture them and maybe either one, find ways to amplify other areas of my destination or encourage offers or maybe even a return visit. So I love to hear that you're using a lot of those channels. Bringing that all together then to talk about measuring success, which is always pretty important as part of these. What other methods maybe, Derek, are you guys using to maybe quantify and measure some of the marketing impact of sporting events within your destination?
Yeah, a lot of the benefits that we've seen using the SimpleView CRM that we have, it's beneficial to find out how we can calculate the estimated economic impact using these formulas that we enter into our system. So I know the Nebraska Tourism Commission works with Dean Runyon Associates, and they always are updating the estimated economic impact for local, state, as well as the regional, national, and international travel based on the length of hotel stay. So we take a look at that, and then we also run the current economy and where our state's at, just to kind of see how those formulas are working out for us. So the CRM is definitely able to calculate a great economic impact for us. So we know exactly, of the events that we bring and of those that we market through the social media campaigns and how we do that, what's had the greatest impact for us. So it's been really good for us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know, taking this kind of data-driven approach, we're starting to see more and more DMOs move to that front, whether it's leveraging the CRM or location intelligence data or a combination thereof. Utilizing the analytics that are at your disposal to make more data-driven decisions is certainly a trend we're moving towards. Speaking of trends, something I want to ask you about too, as it relates to to esports, right? We're hearing a lot of buzz around some of that stuff and trends going there. And when we talk about metaverse and web and all these things, well, we can go down a rabbit hole with some of this stuff. We're probably many years out for some of these things, but we are starting to see a lot of DMOs start to talk about hosting some of these types of events. So it is a fast emerging trend. So I'd love to know a little bit more if you guys are focusing on trying to reach that audience, or what efforts maybe you're making to host some esports events in your area.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the sports tourism industry, you are fully aware that esports is one of the fastest growing markets that we have. And so it's very important, again, to be building those relationships, not only locally, but, regionally, to see what's out there. For us, we've been attending the past couple of years, the Esports Travel Summit, just building those relationships, learning the talk. Again, this is an industry that I'm not familiar with. So, if you needed me to go talk shop with, a bunch of traditional sports, I can do that. But getting into some of the bandwidth lingo and certain things that you need for some of these esports competitions, it's just good to get out there and start having conversations. And what I've found with a lot of the rights holders within the esports is they are eager to give you information. They're not going to, talk down to you because maybe you're not as fluent in the lingo that they have. They just want to be able to host their events in your cities. And so we've been having good success in building that market for us. We've hosted the first Unified Esports Championships here in Lincoln last July at the Pinnacle Bank Arena. We actually coordinated it with our Cornhusker State Games, which has over 12,000 athletes across like 60 plus sports. And the first year that esports was a competition, it was the second most generated as far as contestant base. So we expect this year they'll be number one. Just that's how fast this is growing.
Yeah, it really is growing fast. That's why I wanted to ask you about it, right? Because we are just starting. We're at the very much in the beginning of this phase of doing this. But I love your approach of saying, hey, we're going to attend some of these events or these summits to just educate ourselves and to learn more about this space. There's a handful of experts that are out there in this space right now, but trying to find those folks and talk with those folks and network with those folks, I think is a solid strategy and approach, and I'm glad to see you guys are doing that. As it is an area, as you've already mentioned, in the short time that you guys have been doing it and hosting that event, you've seen a lot of success so far, and there's a lot more to come. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ask, in wrapping things up, then Derek, is something that we ask all of our guests on here is for some advice, and you being an expert in sports tourism marketing, I'd love for you to maybe share some insights or some advice with your DMO friends out there of ways they might be able to increase sports tourism within their destination.
Yeah, I mean, institutional knowledge is key in our industry. It's important to just keep gaining information. So one of the things that I've done, I applied to be on the board of directors for the Sports Events and Tourism Association. So just gaining that experience and gaining, new friends and new colleagues to just communicate with, discuss, bounce ideas off with. I'm also the president of Sports Nebraska, which is our state association. There's a ton of state associations out there. Just networking with them in different ways that you can. And then another organization that we help start is the Cities of the Big Ten. So all schools that are associated with the Big Ten Conference, we get together, try at least once a year is what we try to do, just to bounce ideas off one another, see how we can promote each other's destinations when the Big Ten Conference is, competing against one another. But then again, I always take things back locally, get to know who's in your city, because they are major players in the industry that you might not know about, with their specific information and their knowledge on their sport. So they can help find events that you might not be looking for. And then the better relationship we have with them, the more they're likely to say yes if you want to bid on and get an event to your city. So networking is the end all be all in our industry.
Boy, that's it. We learned a lot about that during the pandemic. I think that's one of the best things to do, right? Competition, it's a saying I like, is that competition makes us fast, but collaboration makes us better. And so finding these partnerships or these ways to network to be better at what we do, there's enough to go around. We just need to find and make those connections. So when the time is right, they're choosing you over another destination. So I think that's great advice to share. So really, thank you so much, Derek, for your time and coming on and sharing, some of the great things that you guys are doing there in Lincoln to really attract sports tourism, sharing some campaigns and marketing, how you guys are measuring results. And then that advice at the end. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the time today.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
You bet. And thanks for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, please do so now. We're also available on audio podcasts through iTunes and Spotify. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time, and have a great day.